Good evening. You're listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show, the Xtreme 80s edition. I'm your host, Rob. With me tonight is the real Dr. V, where we're going to be covering Gleaming the Cube, starring a very young Christian Slater. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening. I'm
Well,
doing all right.
it's plenty of sunshine here. Just broadcasting from the Pine Hills Palace, west of Orlando, Florida. And I gotta sit there and say, Gleaming the Cube. It's part of my spiel about Usher and my time for another confession. And this is another 80s movie I haven't seen, hence why we did it. And we had covered recently Rad and Vision Quest. So it was time to pull in another one thanks to somebody recommending it in one of our channels, and that's Gleaming the Cube. And it's a skateboard movie. Or as I
Yep.
would like to say, Doctor, my initial thoughts, and then I'll pass it over to you, is that this in no way is a skateboarding movie. It's a movie that has skateboarding in it. It's one of the last movies of the 1980s that is like a
I was.
mishmash of everything that's 80s in here, from the cop chases to the bad guy to the language to the Asian women to the assassination attempts to all the stuff that's in here, including Michael Nouri, I believe, is in here as well. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, this is a movie on the brink of right in the '90s. It's 1989. Started skateboarding in this. They're trying to go. They're trying to still. I don't know whose idea it was, but I think it placed in in California.
Yes,
Yeah.
Irvine.
So yeah, Irvine, California. So skateboarding was still big back then.
Oh yes,
We had a young Tony Hawk in there. He made a cameo. 21.
he's the
He's a 21.
skinniest of the skinny guys in that crew, by the way,
He's the
and the
Pizza Hut
tallest.
guy.
Yep, the Pizza Hut guy there too. Yep.
Yeah. So it made sense for them, like the transition from the '80s into the '90s. They were still skateboarding stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they made any more skateboard movies like right around that time or a little bit after. Uh, yeah, they just when you're doing Gleaming the Cube here in this movie, it's not completely all about them, skateboarding. Yes, you're a bunch of kids, they're well, skateboarders. They were looked at as the troublemakers. They're the ones that are always going around to people's. So today, I see people
There are a bunch of
skateboarding.
hooligans in this movie, sir.
Yes, yes. And I'll say this: skateboarding is still popular today. Um, I'm not talking about the professional sports and stuff. I'm talking about people actually going out, kids getting together, actually going skateboarding. I've seen people on bikes and skateboarders like in harmony together because people love skateboarding. Uh, when you're good at something, you kind of want to keep working on it. So people are gonna go. Like I've seen it in front of McDonald's. I've seen it in front of actual shops. So, especially perfect time right now if you're a skateboarder. Everyone's on lockdown right now. All stores are closed. This is a time when there's hardly any cops that go around, and it's just go skateboard, man. Just make sure you don't hurt yourself.
Get fat
but
with mad skills, yo.
yeah, but this movie though, it's not. I'd say there's about as much skateboarding here as maybe a little bit more than Back to the Future. I'd say
Yeah, there's definitely what I call several Back to the Future scenes, but
the skateboarding is a subplot. I mean, it's his character. He's a troubled teen. His dad doesn't like him. He rebels. He does what he wants to do. Nobody understands him. And then like he kind of like changes his way. He blends in with society. He's like, well, no one's gonna believe me because I'm dressed as a punk. So he takes off his earring. Combs his hair and stuff. Puts on normal clothes.
that is creepy, sir, and that's what makes this movie special. Is that this is not a
Yeah,
straightforward '80s type of bubblegum thing like Vision Quest. That's completely the opposite. It's
yeah.
dark. It's got all sorts
It's
of
grungy.
weirdness in it. It's like I say, it's a combination of everything that makes like '80s shows there, minus the humor and the fun times. Because basically, to your point, he has a Vietnamese brother who's adopted, roughly the same age. They get along fairly well, but he's a punk for an Asian guy. He's smoking. He's sneaking out the window. His girl's coming over to see him. I mean, so in a way, I really respect him, but that in no way is accurately reflecting Asians that came over after Vietnam and settled in the 70s and 80s, especially in California and similarly here in Central Florida or anywhere else. And I gotta tell you, he gets whacked early on after he climbs the conveniently placed fake pine tree into conveniently opened up place in the medical supply facility. And then I popped hard because when he runs back, and there's weird camera angles too in here. It's like looking through the stairs by the box that he was trying to find the stolen goods and stuff. And the guy who's like, "No, I'm the owner," and he's got a gun on him, and they don't show him getting shot or anything. And I popped because that's Mr. Richard Hurt. That is TJ Hooker's boss. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh, this is what everybody does when they're not on TJ Hooker anymore, because this movie came out like 88, 89. And I'm going, wow, this guy's a real prick. I like him. But there was two things missing out of this entire movie. And that should have been Bolo Young should have been in here somewhere as the bad guy, or Korean Chuck Norris. That was the way I'm looking at it, because his brother, they do something really, I think, dark. They take him to this hotel room. They go to strangle him to kind of put the squeeze on him, literally and figuratively, to get the info out of him about what he knows, because they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. Because really, and again, this is what makes communism, hating on it, so awesome and popular, especially in the 80s, is they're trying to send supplies over, it looks like, to fight against anti-communists that have taken over the country, but they're really doing something nefarious. And this kid had stumbled upon it during a clerical error. And of course, he's a punk too. He's breaking into places where he shouldn't be, and that's why he ends up dying. Because the hitman in here is choking him with a towel that he rolled up and put underwater to make it really tight. And I guess he cinched it too hard, and it was an accidental killing. And you find this out like 10, 15 minutes into the movie, and you're like, holy crap, this isn't leading up to some big showdown like that. They're just going to
No.
whack the brother here, then spend the second third of the movie showing Christian Slater do exactly what you said, and that is, I'm going to change my ways. Instead of listening to punk and Megadeth and all that, I'm literally going to hang my skateboard up, cut my hair, because my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, thinks I look cute now and says the world will see me in a different way. So it's like an extreme makeover, 80s style.
It was. Uh, and this movie though, when you compare this movie to the other movies we got at the time, we like two. I think I probably the two biggest influences for people to get into BMX or getting into skateboarding back then was this movie and the
Yes,
movie Red.
I agree.
These were your two movies. Even though Red, in my opinion, it was a little bit more popular, even though it did flop. This was a little more cheese, But I mean, but I don't. I'm not. When I say cheese, I don't mean in a bad way. I mean it's like it's what you'd expect from a movie that's going into trying to go from the 80s and the 90s. I mean, there's not much you can do with skateboards as far as skateboard movies. It's a group of kids, younger kids, taking down bad guys. It's not as corny as like Three Ninjas. No, it's not like that.
Right, like I say,
Um,
this is not a corny film. It's
this
not.
is this is one of the movies that I thought up other than pump up the volume is what made Christian Slater like that epitome of cool. You know, look at it. You look at his. You look at the posters on his wall. You look at everything he had, the shirt stuff, and then you look at the fallout shelter he had, dude.
Yeah, it's
It's
true.
like
That's
this
their
is like
underground layer, literally.
yeah, literally yeah. It's like this is the movie that made you like, man, like Christian Slater's an awesome guy, and like he's got the hair, he's got the ladies, He's like it's like this is what you wanted to base your life on. Like I want to be like Christian Slater. Like it's awesome in this movie.
Yeah, he did have some great product in his hair, because that thing did not move an inch. I give him credit for that. And the other '80s fashionista in me comes out when he was towards the end doing the Back to the Future move on the. Well, actually, I should back up for a minute and say, in case people don't know about us talking about Gleaming the Cube, it's brought to you by Pizza Hut, Corvette, and Cal Irvine. But when he's on the back of the a sports car there, he's the Corvette. He's the guy that's like the fake David Hasselhoff wannabe. He's driving or whatever, and you see Christian Slater on there, and I'm going, hey, that guy I think's wearing a members only jacket, one of those racing editions. I mean, so and of course there's Converse All Stars everybody's wearing too. But when you watch this movie, one of the things I liked about it, two things specifically. One, generally, it was just filmed in a couple different places in LA, but in Irvine, it looks like what regular middle class suburbia is. But it's not the suburbia of like what we've talked about with Eglinton from I Love Comics, John Hughes films, where it's sometimes hard to relate because they come from the rich white class at the time. They're doctors, lawyers, sons of and daughters of those, where you can't relate. Here, he's not a bad guy like he's a gangbanger or he's smoking
No,
pot or doing drugs or anything like that. But he did kind of lash out in a way as a game
oh,
analysis, because they adopted a Vietnamese kid, but his
his
parents
dad's a
actually
dick.
still liked them. Yeah, he's being
But his
more.
dad,
Yeah, well,
his dad's a dick though. It's like, oh, it's like it's
Yeah, but you could be that way back then and get away with it because, frankly, it is true. I bust my ass to provide you this nice house with a wife, and we have two kids, and you're sitting there acting like this, and there's no reason for it. And his mom even loves him so much she goes and buys him the
I
pads and
know.
everything. So they were actually really nice parents. And I'm going,
Oh yeah, yeah.
I don't know if I like
His
this
mom was cool,
character
but
Christian's playing.
his dad though, it like reminded me of like the dad from like Twisted Sisters. We're not gonna take it. It's like
It's not him,
Trump
but this
daughter getting
guy
my
has
choice.
been in other stuff before, and
Yeah, I
that's
know.
he comes across as that crotchety kind of guy. I think he was one of the bad parents in I think maybe Weird Science, but yeah, it's the middle part of this movie is the best to me because, as I was saying, there's two parts about it that I thought really were good, and the second part is you get a little bit at the beginning, which honestly confused me as a watcher because not having seen the film before, I thought there were some really nice scenes of skateboarding. Because it's one thing to watch somebody skateboard and do tricks, it's another thing to film it in such a way where either you have that first person perspective that they did do, where you feel like you're going on it, and then you would stop and watch somebody else do their tricks to it. And in it, other than the Back to the Future move, holding on to something while a car while it's driving, they had a lot of great ones. And actually, there's a scene here where it really picks up to me when he gets his customized, super fast board from his boy in the bunker, and he's being chased by the three motorcycle ninjas, and they're going down. They're like, it looks like the Hollywood Hills to me, but they're going down it, and you get a lot of the skateboarding where like the camera's like on the bottom of it. And I don't know how they filmed it, but it gives you the sensation of like you're on it doing it. So like I say, it's not a skateboarding movie at all, but it's got some skateboarding in it, and the skateboarding in it that's very good. And for the genius that is the movie Hot Rod, which we had covered a few months back, he has a few ragers in here too, where he gets really mad, goes out, and he just has to have a skateboard moment or two for us to see before things get real.
Is I was just noticing because I remember because my sister lives out away from me, a couple of cities over. They built a brand new skate park for skateboarders,
Hmm.
just because to keep people from going into church. Well, basically they're building them to discourage people from going to like parking lots. You know,
Hmm.
because a lot of places do not want people skateboarding because they want to be sued because somebody was doing skateboarding and broke their leg. You know, or somebody hits them with a car or that stuff. Or another customer gets hurt. So I've there's about three different like as I've read it out in my state alone. There's like three different skate parks around, and
Well,
I mean the one where my sister is which is really they have like giant state fair part or that's where they have the state fair for Franklin or not for Franklin but for Wisconsin itself. That thing's always packed. And then, which is really cool about there is like dude, if I'd have been younger and then they would have had that, I would have been skateboarding and then walking up to the comic book store, which is like literally like 20 feet away.
yeah, and there's nothing elitist about this movie. One of the things we always talk about with sports, especially here in Central Florida, golf. Orlando's the golf capital of the world, basically, and there's so many golf courses and all that. Things have changed in the market over the past
Yeah.
10, 20 years. But that being said, you can't go 1, 2 miles without at least one or
No,
two golf courses. But you have to have a lot of money, not just for the equipment, but for lessons, but also for playing. But to me, even I'm in a fairly decent area and next to me is a really rich area. They have their own skate park, and every time I go by there, I see a lot of people in there, but they're hardly using it at all. And I'm telling you, all the people that can really skateboard are the ones that are not in the skate parks, for the most part, at least where I see. And then Pine Hills, it's a ghetto over here. It used to be nice. You see people on the streets, you see them, in pools like they were here in this movie trying to do it. And, you know, hey, you got to have something to do. It's better than sitting around doing nothing. And to your point, it's still popular. So I can see where this movie, and I think Thrashing, which we haven't talked about, is something that because they all came and you had other extreme types movies, like we mentioned before, Vision Quest was wrestling. Well, wrestling's an individual sport. Well, hey, guess what? So is BMX racing. So is what we're talking about here with skateboarding. So that individuality that we've talked about that comes across a lot in some 80s movies is present here because really Christian Slater's just trying to find out who killed his brother because he doesn't think he's the type of kid that would do that to himself, and he's right.
yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
would
you never
believe
hang
him.
yourself.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
and the last conversation he had was, hey, don't believe adults, and that's kind of the whole setup for what he goes through. And when he cuts his hair, and he changes his clothes and he puts on the really nice sweater and shirt and he rides the bike to school. I mean, his friends
Right.
don't really, they're concerned, but they're not waterboarding him or anything,
Well,
you know. But
they kind of they
he's
kind of
seeing what
tease him.
it's
I
like
like,
when,
good.
when you're traveling in a different circle, and I was like, oh,
It was
okay.
just funny because they're like teasing him, like, I was like, they're like, oh my god, what the hell happened to you? It's like, are you feeling all right? They're like, you need to go see a doctor. This just kept harassing them. Uh, for this, I was looking up the this movie. The skate director they had for this was actually Stacy Peralta. If you people know who that is, he's from the original the Z, Dogtown the Z Boys. He's one of the original Z Boys from Venice, California, Los Angeles.
Hmm.
He basically he's also a surfer with the Zephyr competition team, which is known as the Z Boys. But he's also a professional skater. So he's the one that trained the kids, how the actors how to do the skateboarding.
Yeah.
Because towards the end there, like or even there's some you can tell when they switch out, they actually have a professional go on there. But
Yes.
just the basics. If you've never been on a skateboard, it's not as easy as it looks.
No, and that's a good point because one thing, as I mentioned with BMX, is that one might argue that say BMX racing is harder than skateboarding because there's more moving parts, there's gears, there's brakes, not necessarily on a BMX bike per se, but you're controlling something that weighs a lot more and you're moving probably at a faster speed. Whereas maybe if you're just skateboarding, which I cannot skateboard well at all. I've never had one. Eglantine could skateboard a little bit, but doing this kind of stuff and tricks and all that, I've got some other family members that skateboard and could do it very well. It just didn't feel natural or right, and I get it, and that's why I kind of appreciate it because you just go, oh, it's a board that's what, a foot or so, and you know all those little things matter where you're talking about getting a tighter fit and better wheels and stuff with more surface area for traction to go faster and whatnot. That's kind of neat, and I've seen a lot of kids over the years skateboarding that can barely stand on it, or if they switch, their which foot's their lead foot, they can't do it. And then here, just them skating through a parking lot and just kind of leaning back and forth, you can tell they're very fluid looking, and you can't fake that. You can't replace
I
that. And
would
that's why I
I
appreciated
would
the fact
imagine
they had these people in here doing it.
I would imagine these people that are skateboarding are also like great. If you're good at skateboarding, I would imagine you also have the skills to be good at do snowboarding. So especially when it comes to the X Games, I wouldn't be surprised you see some of these guys that are doing snowboarding, like Sean White, who grew up riding
Right.
skateboards.
Yes. 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 And that's a good point too, because an individual sport's different than a team sport as far as your ability to produce and where you can fit in. So it's a bit more, I think, cut and dry. Either you're going to be able to go down at half pipe and do a ollie or whatever all these moves names are, or you're not.
No,
You're going to fail. And that's the thing too is early on when they find it, they're doing stuff. They're celebrating when everybody pulls off a good move, but when they're bad, they're not. Again, berating them.
but
They're basically like, "Hey, get up, bro. Hey, good try."
yeah,
And that's, you can't replace that in sports, and that's
when I
a positive thing about here, I think.
when I wasn't skateboarding when I was younger, I was always playing the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games for the PlayStation.
Hmm.
You remember those?
Yes.
And man, and those for the people who love skateboarding like that because you always see all the other games you can do stuff and all. There's racing games, but I always thought those. I was like, wow, skateboarding's actually become that popular, like from Tony Hawk, that they actually are making video games based off this. Because there was a cruising. Or was it cruise? No, was it Cruising USA or like it was something like that. It was an old Atari game for Nintendo, and you're on a pink skateboard, and you're just skating through the levels.
Yeah, and there was a very popular skating game. Alan Team
Oh,
was a
no,
great video game player, and
California
he could play it
Dreams.
really good. Yeah,
Yes,
and it was
California
skate or
Dreams was the name
die.
of the game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember California Dreams? That's the name of the game. That's what it was.
Yeah, the only other thing about this movie that really stood out to me that I had to mention is this. I popped because, like I said, Hooker's boss was in here, and there's a few other B-level type actors. But Stephen Bauer, who plays the lead detective in here, that he's talking to a lot, trying to investigate things. He's the dude from Scarface. He's not the Scarface guy, Al Pacino, of course, but he's like the other guy. And I kept thinking, man, he just, it's of course it's not even a decade removed from Scarface, and it seemed like to me, I'm like, God, I can't stop thinking about him and Scarface. And this is how a movie can typecast you early on too, when you just pop for somebody because of something you remember 'em for something else. But for me, Gleaming the Cube will always be the movie that I was like, yeah, that's one that's the skateboarding movie, and I know Thrashin' was the other one, which we'll probably talk about at some point. But yeah, this one,
Oh
the
yeah,
great thing about it was it's very low down to earth kind of average movie. There's nothing fancy about it. I like it. I like the fact that it's not a skateboarding movie. I like the fact that it just involves it with a group of people that are attracted to it, and the type of people that are attracted to it. These individual people that band together at the end. You know,
I
it's a
was
good thing.
I
It's
would
kind of neat.
I would say this is a clean edition of basically because when people think about skateboarders, they think of the guys with long hair, like kind of like Point Break, yeah, like they're smoking reefer and they're just
Yeah.
drinking alcohol and stuff, The Lords of Dogtown, or what was the other one? They had Skateboard. That was the other one. There's a couple different ones that came out in the '80s and then late '90s and then 2000s. But Lords of Dogtown never would have been made if it wouldn't have been for all this other crap that's going on as far as all the other movies.
Hmm.
People actually wanting to watch skateboard stuff. I'm still amazed that it got into the X Games because X Games were kind of like frowned upon at first, if I remember correctly. People they're like, what, BMXing and skateboarding, and they're like, what? Like, no, those aren't real sports because people at the Olympics are like, no, we do downhill skiing, cross, and all the preppy stuff. So these were your punk, your things that you consider that their punk style. The guns are going doing the BMXing, people are doing skateboarding. They were always labeled as the bad crowd. You don't want to date that guy. He's a skater. He's a skater punk. Trash. It's like,
You
and
know,
I
I was
some
gonna
of
say,
that's Hollywood, some of that's Hollywood, but some of that's actually high school kids.
well, for the
So
older people listening to this that are football fans, obviously I do Rob's Redskins review, during football season because I'm a big lifelong fan, and it made me a little sad seeing the Rams being an integral part of this film here with the hat and everything before they'd moved or not and everything. But the thing about sports though back then to now that I think for an older person, it's hard to impress upon. Say, I joke about you being a millennial, but the millennial crowd or the Z crowd now is that
yeah,
in the '80s, and we mentioned before how I remember Michael Jordan in the Olympics before he was in the NBA, before the NBA basically said, "Okay, we're going to make the league all about you," the '87, '88 dunk contest. That's another conversation. But the old timers like myself would sit there and tell you that there was something to be said about one, you're getting more channels, so you have to throw more content out there, like the NBA expanding or any professional franchise sports wise, that's going to water down things. And it just does simply because of numbers in general. And anybody that's a fan of sports knows that. The other thing to that too is that a lot of times the big three of sports were considered, holy ground. And then when you would have the Olympics basketball team for men's all of a sudden not getting gold anymore. And then they said, okay, we're going to throw our professional players at you. Because remember, the Olympics are supposed to be amateur, and it is for everybody around the world except for the United States up to a point. There is a certain, I think, pissiness that people like myself that grew up, with people going to college for 4 years playing sports and the Olympics representing our amateurs against the world's best was a big deal. And we joked about like Kurt Thomas being in Rad and other things too. That's how big it was, an athlete in the 80s. Bruce Jenner, we've talked about. The guy was huge and phenomenal. He's obviously had a second career now with something else. But something like skateboarding or BMX to somebody that grew up on like basketball and football in the 70s and 80s, which probably will never be replaced,
yeah,
they're going, why would we have individual sports that celebrates the type of people that can't get along and play on a team together? And I think
yeah,
that
yeah.
with the X Games is where there's a lot of old guard versus new guard. I kind of liked it because I like BMXing, and it was interesting to see people skateboarding and all these kinds of tricks. Because if you do something and you do it really well, that's great. But then when you talk about a lot of other sports that people don't like making it, I mean, people think the Olympics has gotten watered down, and there's an argument made for that. That being said, the best thing about this movie is the fact that even though you've had other skateboard movies, for some reason this, and I don't think it's because Christian Slater has gotten popular again in his renaissance here with iRobot and everything else he's done. It's a pretty honest movie with what it's trying to do. It's not saying, hey, we're going to show you a bunch of skateboards and we're going to show you all the best tricks. It's no, here's a subculture, something happens, and it just evolves the way it is. It's a very generic paint by numbers '80s cop kind of episode with no
It
surprises at
kind of
all.
it kind of reminded me of like Cuffs a little bit in a sense. The same kind of character, like his. his brother, I think his brother was murdered. It's in the cops. I can remember. It's been a while since I've seen it, but he was trying to get the criminals,
Hmm.
and knowing like, well, you're a punk, you gotta, stuff against you and stuff.
Yeah, I
So you
think
want to get yeah. So it's a tale of basically basically another movie of basically don't judge someone by their looks. You know, literally.
unless they have a good haircut, nice clothes, because then it matters. Because then they've put on an
But
outfit.
I mean, as far as Christian Slater not being as popular as he was back then in the '90s, I remember him and a few other people were they had their own little rat pack for a while. Towards I think it was it I think Leonardo DiCaprio and
Yep, late
he was
'90s. Yep, all
River
of them.
Phoenix, yeah. But no, I honestly I would love to see more stuff of Christian Slater. I mean, I'm the person not into Bad Robot, but I would love to see more stuff. He had a couple different shows. He had like Breaking In. He played an expert thief. He
Yes.
was he had a home security system. But I think Hollywood kind of overlooks him because well his age and because like well what has he really done? I'm like my dude's been in some good movies. It's like well that's and I say that because maybe because I'm biased because I actually like his acting. People are like, well, he can't act. He just plays the same role over. I'm like, dude, I don't care if he plays the same role as long as he's good at it, and then the movie actually is great.
Yeah,
Look at Stallone. Plays
it's a
every
yeah.
Stallone does the same thing. He's a
It's a Jack Nicholson imitation, and it's just gotten more seasoned over the years. Really, I mean that's what it is. That's what a lot of
but
people like to say.
do you hate Jack Nicholson though?
You know what you're going to get, and like we've said with Clint Eastwood and other people, as one note as they may seem to be in terms of that, I think people will want to go see charisma, and then chemistry, and then acting skills. Because do I want to see Christian Slater do Hamlet? Probably not. But
I would
do
never.
I
I would.
want to see him being a life coach, like in Very Bad Things, a movie we'll talk about at some point on the
Oh,
show?
dude.
Absolutely. I
Dude.
mean, that's what he's suited for. Yeah, overall,
Yep.
I think this movie's fine. There are other '80s movies I would say watch ahead of this one, but this is kind of up there if you're in that kind of off '80s, not '80s central type of vibe, but you still want some '80s. This gives you a good atmosphere of it because it's filmed very low budget looking. It's right there, like I say, in Irvine, around Disneyland, those areas. So it's a solid film. It's nothing spectacular, but there's some good things, some spectacular things in it. I liked it, and I liked the fact that it probably wasn't a skateboard movie because I actually had to pay attention to the story and the plot and the characters here rather than the skateboarding stuff, and that was just an added bonus. I think that was a wise choice. So yeah, Gleaming the Cube, solid film, worth a watch. Any final thoughts for you, sir?
I'll say that don't write off a movie because it looks cheesy from the preview. Actually, go ahead, jump in there. Um, you're not gonna get woke politics like you're like with like Birds of Prey and other stuff. This is actually like back when they actually still gave a crap about actual movies.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
definitely a solid film. I agree with
I
you.
mean, it's just like this is like I always thought this was like 93, 92, but it always blows my mind when I remember like, oh yeah, it's 89. It just made the cut before it got into the 90s because it feels like a 90s movie, doesn't
It,
it?
some of the clothes make me think, yeah, it's definitely not the '80s anymore, and it's transitioning into it. But yeah,
And one last question: whose idea was it to make the Asian kid the computer guy?
I've never heard of that. I don't know why they would. Because he's not
Because
the skateboarding guy.
because
Because you got to have the contrast.
he's a nerdy smart guy. It's like what?
He's the white kid those parents always had, but wanted to have, but didn't because they end up getting a little punk spoiled brat that wanted to go gleam the cube. No, it's an okay film. It's pretty
Now
good.
here's comes the real question: would you consider this movie was a huge flop and couldn't get toward the box office? It had a budget of like 10 million. It only came brought in to just a
Right.
little bit over 2 million. Would you like to see this rebooted with Christian Slater being in there, being the parent, or being involved in anywhere?
Well, I will say
If
that
it-
I didn't really know
Christian,
what to
or
expect
Christian Slater
really.
being the cop?
I I didn't know what to expect with it. Like I say, if they had Korean Chuck Norris and Bolo Young in here, and maybe even T.J. Hooker as the detective instead of the Scarface guy, but even though he was fine, he was humorous. It would have been an interesting movie. So sometimes you can take a movie and twist it around, add stuff to it, make it sound a lot better. But no,
I
it's not
I would
bad.
love to have. I want to have. What's his name? Oh,
That guy, you know
no,
him,
T.J. Hooker himself,
Shatner.
Shatner as the bad guy.
We will be talking more about Shatner as a bad guy, plenty. Okay.
I want him to be like a drug lord, or like break his legs, Tony.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for being extreme. Have a good night.